This story took me quite a while to write out, as I'm not much of an author myself, and it's quite painful for me to relay. Hopefully, this will help someone though, as it's something I've wanted to share for quite some time. It involves 2 days in my life that I'd always thought were very fun, but somewhat weird, and how, when I grew up and was told what really happened, they've haunted me ever since. It all started when my dad's business partner came to pick me up from school one day. I knew him as Uncle Todd, and although I wasn't expecting him, I trusted him completely when he told me that my mom and dad were busy and he would be in charge of looking after me for a few days. I remember feeling kind of reluctant to get into his car for some reason. After all, mom and dad hadn't told me anything about this. I didn't really want to be away from them. But then he started promising me ice cream, a Game Boy, all this fun stuff. He also told me mom and dad had said I could watch whatever I wanted on the TV and that I was allowed to stay up until whenever I wanted to. Music to a kid's ears, right? So I got into his car and we drove off to his apartment, stopping to get some ice cream on the way. Todd was serious about the TV thing too, as he pretty much left me in his apartment on my own for hours on end. I remember he seemed to be very stressed out about something. I always assumed it was just grown-up stuff or something like that. I didn't really care much. I had all the Nickelodeon and McDonald's I could ever want. And that's how I spent the first night. It was also weird to me that Uncle Todd's apartment was so small that we both had to sleep in the same room. I still wasn't questioning anything though, because he was such a regular part of my life, and I trusted him completely. The next day, after more McDonald's and a bunch more Nickelodeon, Uncle Todd came back super stressed once again and told me to get into the bathtub. I thought he meant that I could take a bath or whatever, but that's not what he meant. He walked me over to the bathtub and made me get inside without any water in it and without taking my clothes off either. I could then hear him talking into the phone in the other room, trying to keep his voice down. I could still hear though how angry and stressed out he seemed to be at the person on the other end. Eventually he went silent, put the phone down and went to grab me out of the tub. I remember him putting me back on the bed and telling me he was going to get more McDonald's and ice cream for me. Then, as he went to walk out of the room, he picked up this pokey-looking thing in his hand, obviously to take out to his car. I remember asking him what that was, and he told me it was a thing for getting his car started on cold mornings. It hadn't even been that cold that morning or the morning before, but hey, at that age, grown-ups know best, right? Anyway, a few hours later, he drove me back to my parents' place, and they gave him a present for looking after me while they were gone. My mom and dad seemed really happy to see me, and I was really happy to see them too. They said they missed me, and I missed them a bunch as well. I didn't really think any further into it than that. It was only when I was all grown up that I was finally told what actually happened. You see, Uncle Todd and my dad really were business partners, but my dad was not exactly a good or honest person. He'd actually stolen a bunch of money from their business out from under Todd's nose, and he'd actually tried to rearrange some accounting so Todd wouldn't notice either. But Todd did notice, and he got very angry about this. He told my dad to give it back, or he was going to call the cops. My dad told him he'd already spent the money, and if he called the cops and got him thrown in jail, he was never going to get it back. Pretty scummy, I know, but my dad is generally an awful person all around, so I won't go too far into that. Either way, Todd turned out to be way more of a psycho than my dad figured, because instead of calling the cops and getting him arrested, he came up with another plan to get his money back. That's how he ended up showing at my school and convincing me to get into his car. My dad tried to give Todd all these promises that he'd pay him back and get all squared off, but Todd wouldn't believe him. He wanted his money back and he wanted it soon, so he grabbed me and let my mom and dad sweat it out for a day. He told them that if they didn't give him the money in 24 hours, he was going to kill me. Not exactly the best plan. But like I said, Todd was kinda psycho. He fed me McDonald's, gave me ice cream, and let me watch as much cable as I wanted to keep me from leaving what turned out to be the motel room. That's why, for the longest time, I thought motels were places people actually lived, and not places where people only rented a room for a few days or whatever. Then there's the whole bathtub thing. Todd put me in the bathtub that day and brought an ice pack because he was going to torture me while making my parents listen on the phone. That was what made them finally break, and they ended up selling a bunch of things and doing other shady stuff in order to get 10 grand worth of cash together in the space of a day. When they called to say that they had the money, Todd finally took me back home and grabbed the cash, which I'd thought was a gift for taking care of me, and then we never saw him again. Mom and Dad got a divorce not long after, which was sad, but a few of my friends' parents had gotten divorces too. I knew it was a thing that moms and dads occasionally did. I had no idea it was because of all the stealing and the kidnapping. It was also because Dad basically refused to go to the cops about what happened because he was too scared of going to jail himself. My mom just completely resented him after that. She also told me my dad told her if she tried to press charges against Todd, he was going to tell the cops she was in on the scam or whatever, and she would end up catching charges as well. Sometimes I think she might have actually been part of it, and that's why she didn't go to the cops right away when she found out Todd had taken me. I don't know, a lot about the story doesn't add up, but since I don't see my dad anymore, and my mom is the only member of my immediate family I'm close to, I don't exactly want to confront her about it. So yeah, that's the story of my super messed up family and how one of the weirdest, most fun times in my childhood turned out to be something completely horrible and kind of dramatic, honestly. In hindsight, it seems really scary because I had no idea what was happening. It all seemed completely innocent, but I was minutes away from something out of a living nightmare, with my Uncle Todd doing all kinds of evil stuff to me in that bathtub, making me scream into the phone for my parents to hear. I wanted to tell you the story of a friend of mine named Angel. Angel is 19 and was honestly one of the brightest, cleverest, and most bubbly people I've ever met. She was obsessed with true crime stuff. She loved that TV program CSI and wanted to join the police so she could get into the forensic side of investigations. She loved the idea of using science to catch horrible criminals, but we never thought she'd end up being the victim of one herself. She had everything going for her in life, but then she met her ex-boyfriend Jay, and we saw a change in her right away. Jay made everything about him, and he abused Angel physically and mentally until she made everything about him too. She was miserable with him, but kept talking like he was just a tortured soul who needed a girl like her in his life to help fix him. We had to intervene time and time again to get her to see what a scumbag he was, who'd never be good for anyone. He was only ever interested in himself. It took ages to do this, but we finally managed to convince her to leave him. She told us all in a group chat that she'd finally told him they couldn't be together anymore. We were all so proud of her, but she also said that she was terrified of something he'd do to get back at her for this. As much as we knew that her dad, Patty, would never let anything happen to her while she was under his roof, we knew that he also couldn't protect her all the time. We knew that Jay was terrified of Patty himself, as they'd almost gotten into fights a few times before. Patty was way bigger than Jay and could easily beat the life out of him if it came to it, so he always stayed away from the house, just not far enough. I remember the day we found out that Angel was in the hospital. We were all hoping it wasn't anything serious, but then we heard she'd been hurt in a very serious incident. She'd fallen out of a van that was going down the highway somehow. We all just knew Jay had something to do with it. As it turns out, Jay had recruited the help of one of his friends. They'd waited in a van near Angel's house, waiting for her to come out. When they spotted her, Jay ran out, picked her up, then carried her to the van and threw her into the back of it. We still don't know what exactly went on inside that van. He insisted in court that he hadn't just thrown her out, but whatever he was doing or saying, it had scared Angel so much that she somehow found a way to open the back doors as it was running down the highway. She must have thought her only chance of survival was jumping out the back of that van. Some people say Jay pushed her out the back as a way to kill her, but at his trial, his lawyers were somehow able to prove that he had not pushed her, and all he wanted to do was keep her inside the van. He must have admitted to wanting to kidnap or scare her into getting back with him, but I know Angel. She wouldn't have done something so drastic without being scared for her life. What happened next made it clear to me that the justice system in this country is just completely broken, because the sentence he got was nothing of what he deserved to get. Recently, he got his sentence more than doubled after a big public campaign headed up by her parents. That's all good and everything, but it still feels like nothing, because Angel's life is basically over now. She suffered serious head trauma after falling and being pushed from the back of the van, and now doctors think she'll be potentially disabled for the rest of her life. We don't know if she's ever going to walk, talk, or eat by herself ever again. Basically a death sentence. But the sentence Jay originally was going to get? Just over 4 years. Can you even believe that? This guy kidnapped his girlfriend, might have actually thrown her out the back of a van going 60 miles per hour, basically ended her life, and he was going to get out of prison in just 4 years. That's nothing. The driver of the van basically didn't get punished at all, and he also deserves to be in prison for the rest of his life. Angel once told me about a law in America where if someone dies while you're committing a crime, your charge automatically gets turned into murder. I personally think we should have something like that here too. It would make people think twice about doing things like kidnapping or drunk driving or anything that could end up ruining someone else's life. This happened 2 years ago now, but honestly, it feels like just yesterday that we found out Angel's life was over. I do have a story to tell, but it's not something that happened to me. It's something that actually happened to our neighbors back when we lived in Highgate in London. So I myself wasn't scared for my own safety, but all the neighbors were scared for the family this was happening to, if that makes sense. Also, I've changed the man's name because my mom reckons that his parents would probably never talk to us again if they knew I told this story. Anyway, their son was taking a gap year before he went to uni, and he ended up going off to Thailand for a few months during the summer. His parents kept in touch with him, of course, and he seemed to be having quite a lot of fun. Then, one day out of the blue, they got a phone call from some random guy from Thailand. He asked them something like, "Are you Rob's parents?" Obviously, they said yes. He told them that Rob had been kidnapped. If they contacted the police, they were going to torture and kill him, and if they didn't pay them within a set time limit, they were also going to torture and kill him. Not just that, they were going to feed his body to crocodiles or sharks or whatever else, basically so they'd never have a piece of him to bury. Pretty grim stuff, right? So Rob's mom was basically ready to get the money together right away, anything to keep these guys from hurting Rob. His dad got in touch with the Thai consulate and got the police involved. This caused absolute murder with the couple, no pun intended. There were some nights you could hear them screaming at each other in the kitchen, with Rob's mom screaming out, "You've killed him! You've killed our son!" I mean, it got really intense. Just to let you know, it all ended up basically okay, and thankfully Rob was not seriously injured. But get this. Rob's dad kept telling the kidnappers that he was having trouble sending the money over to the account they'd given him, as his bank kept flagging the transaction for fraud. He acted like he was more than willing to send everything, but he was just having trouble getting it over. That way he could buy more time for the Thai police to track the phone calls and bank account number to the person they needed to arrest. In the end, Rob's parents got another phone call from the Thai police, telling them Rob had been found safe and sound, but that he'd been arrested for fraud or scamming charges or something. As insane as this might sound, it turned out Rob was never actually in any danger. He wasn't in some chicken wire cage or handcuffed to a bloody radiator or whatever. He was actually in on the scam himself. Long story short, he'd run out of money while over there and was too ashamed to ask for more. Instead, he turned to some locals who had a proposition for him. Pretend to be kidnapped, pose for a proof of life picture, and then split the ransom money 50-50 with these so-called kidnappers. Turns out it was a proper little industry where he was staying, and horrible little tow rag backpackers would scam their own parents and each other's out of thousands of pounds at a time. The exchange rate is massive between Thailand's and most of European and American currencies. So the kids would always be like, it's only a few £100 in our money or whatever, and then they just let them go. Then the ungrateful buggers got a few more weeks of traveling with money from their parents. I might have mentioned I don't live next to this family anymore, but as you can imagine, this caused a huge rift between the kid and his parents. I'm pretty sure it's one that's still not healed properly. I totally understand why, too. He put them through torture, all just because he was greedy and too proud to ask for more money for himself. Back when I was in year 10, I went on a school trip to Russia with our school's history society. We all thought it would be the adventure of a lifetime, but it turned out to be a complete nightmare for two different reasons. Firstly, we were on our way to our hotel in St. Petersburg, and it was terrible. We were basically on a coach for 36 hours straight, with a stop only every 12 hours or so, where we could get some food and stuff. A trip to one country ended up being a trip through like 7 different ones. But then, almost as soon as we crossed the border over into Russia, some weird stuff started happening. All of a sudden, right at dawn too, so most of the other kids were asleep already, the bus driver started raising his voice with our teacher, who then started to sound really scared. And that's when the beeping started. 2 cars were on either side of the coach, one in front, one in back, and they were flashing their lights and beeping their horns. Our teacher was telling the coach driver, who was a Russian guy, not to pull over just because he was scared of what the guys in the cars were going to do. The coach driver was saying that if he didn't slow down and stop then and there might be a crash. The car in front kept dangerously slowing down, trying to force us to a stop. As we started to slow down, we thought we were about to be kidnapped by the Russian mafia or something. It was honestly really scary. It turned out the guys that actually stopped us turned out to be people sent to warn us of that very thing. Apparently some rumors had been going around that we were being targeted for a kidnapping. The guys who were beeping and honking had been sent as an escort by the hotel to protect us. There was a big argument between our bus driver and the protection guys because they had guns with them. The driver and our teacher didn't want them to be on the bus with guns in front of us kids. In the end, we had no choice but to have them get on though, sharing the bus with us until we got to our hotel in St. Petersburg. The next thing was that when we were in our hotel at night, none of us were allowed to leave our rooms. If anyone did, the guys with guns would shout at us to go back inside immediately. We couldn't exactly understand what they were saying, but it didn't take a genius to work out what they meant. We went out sightseeing for 2 days with this very same isolation at night. Then, one day, there was a switchover with the security team that was guarding us. All the guys we had come to recognize disappeared, and a new team took over. That night, the bus driver must have come back from going somewhere, and one of the security team challenged him in the hallway. Our teacher told us he tried to explain he was the bus driver and he was a part of our group, but the security guard who stopped him demanded to see some kind of proof of this. Obviously, he didn't have any other than showing his driver's license and uniform from the company he was from. Then, get this, instead of just letting him go to get to his room, the security guys started beating him up. A few of the kids came out of the rooms to see what was going on and literally saw the security guy beating the life out of this bus driver. The driver then basically disappeared after. We were stuck in the hotel for another day. We were supposed to drive on to Moscow to see some of the sights there, so by the time we got another driver, we were already a day behind. At that point, we got the bad news that we wouldn't be going to Moscow at all. Our teacher had basically arranged for us to go back early. We were all gutted about that, but we also noticed something else. Our teacher seemed to be particularly shaken up about something. We all thought it was the whole battered coach driver situation. but it later turned out to be something else entirely. He didn't tell us what happened until we got back home, as he didn't want to scare us. Then, one day in our history society, the very last one before our exams, he told us what had happened and what the battered coach driver had told him. He gave us a little side note saying he didn't know this for certain, but one thing was clear: he didn't want to put us in any further danger. The bus driver had told him the guys guarding us were all Russian secret agents or something, and there was never a threat of being kidnapped by the mafia. They were basically sent by the Russian government to keep an eye on us in case we were some sort of spy group in disguise. When he was being beaten up, the driver said one of the agents had called him a traitor who was in bed with the English, and that if he didn't make himself scarce, next time he'd be taken somewhere secret and disposed of. That's why he refused to drive us anywhere else, and why he disappeared soon after. As our teacher said, it could have been the bus driver just being dramatic. Our teacher also confirmed, though, that when the security team had been asked to show credentials, any kind of document or card to confirm they were private security, they refused to show anything. They also refused to tell us any of their names, where they were from, or answer any questions at all. Our teacher said that the whole thing was one of the most unnerving experiences of his life, and it made it all scarier to think that he had to protect us 20-plus kids from the Russian Secret Service. He was terrified they'd just randomly detain us or lock him up and leave us all alone if he didn't do exactly what they told him. The whole thing caused a big drama in our school, and loads of parents of kids who went on the trip were up in arms about how they could put us in such danger. It was definitely the craziest thing that happened to me in all my school years, and that's my scary story about the time we visited Russia. A few years ago, me and a few friends went to Russia for a Christmas vacation. First thing we did after such a long flight was head out to a bar. We started trying out the different flavors of vodka. When it was our turn to get drinks, we started to try to speak Russian, but the bartender immediately smiled at us and asked, "American?" Turns out his English was really good, so we replied to him in English, "Yep, we're American. Don't hold it against us, please." He just laughed and made a peace sign with 2 fingers, then asked what we were doing in Russia. I told him we were on vacation, then asked him for 5 shots of the chili vodka. 2 European guys at the bar started talking to my friends and I, and suggested playing the I Never game. Both of the guys were bragging, saying how much they could drink and how pretty we all were. They even joked that since there were no boys with us, they should pretend to be our boyfriends to keep all the creeps away. We excused ourselves to the bathroom. Then, instead of finding generic male and female toilets, we were greeted with just one individual bathroom. When we looked inside, we found ourselves staring in on 5 guys, all dressed in suits and sitting down at a small table. They straight away turned their heads towards us and said something quickly in Russian. That's when I noticed guns laying on the table, which they were pointing at us. "Oh, I'm so sorry, we were just trying to find the toilets," I remember saying. We tried to make a quick getaway. Another guy kind of did a half smile and said in perfect English, "I'm sorry for my friend here, but the real toilets are the way you came. I could show you if you like." My friend Deb, now holding my hand, slowly edged backwards to where we came from. "Thank you, but I'm sure we can find it on our own. We just wanted to get the hell out of there." We shakily left that area and were soon engulfed by people once again. We went back to the bartender and explained we couldn't find the toilet and we'd nearly gotten shot while trying to do so. I explained how the guys looked and that it was very odd that there wasn't anyone else but them in there. "Oh, that's fine, don't worry about those guys," said the bartender. So who are they?" "Oh, they're the local mafia, nothing to worry about. Another vodka for you?" My friends and I were just standing there with our mouths open after hearing that. I wanted to leave and go to the hotel bar. How could this bartender be so casual and laid back about this? I know it might not seem like much of a story to everyone else, but who can honestly say they nearly got shot by some Russian mafia guys in the bathroom?